Look at that.
Yeah, it's well and truly, isn't it?
Bugger. Diddly and welcome to another video with me, Fred Hope. My username's EpoDurf, and I think I've blown up the engine on my DRZ400 Suzuki motorbike. I'm going to clean the mud off of it because there's half a Salisbury plane stuck to it at the minute. And then we're going to see if it's fucked or not, and I think it probably is. I've started to be able to get at the engine. I'll give you a quick show of what I've done. There used to be a seat there, you take that off. There used to be a fuel tank there, you take that off. There used to be a carburettor there, you take that out. You disconnect the throttle cables on the other side. There used to be an engine mount here, here and here, and the same the other side. You take that out, and then that goes there. I stamped it with a metal stamp so I know which side is left and which is right. You disconnect a few jobbies, the electrical connectors, the radiator lived there and also there. First point of concern is that very little coolant came out. I know there are only baby radiators, but that is not much coolant. And then I had a look. Inside here. This is the oil cap. I know you don't get oil level until it's run up to temperature, but yeah, okay. That looks to me like mayonnaise. I wonder whether it was an enormously catastrophic head gasket. Just a quick interjection while I'm editing this video. One, there was the right amount of coolant in there. It's only a small pair of radiators and a small amount of space in the engine for coolant, so it was nothing to do with catastrophic head gasket failure. The condensation inside the dipstick tube, again, nothing to worry about. It had been extremely cold and very damp weather, and it's just a symptom of inconstant use and a bit of condensation inside the dipstick tube mixing with a bit of oil vapour, nothing to worry about. As I started taking the engine apart, as you'll see with the superimposed photos, it became clear exactly what had happened. It's a really common issue with that DRZ400, particularly that early engine and that cam chain tensioner, the automatic cam chain tensioner. The whole story of me fixing it leads up to me rebuilding the top end of the engine and installing a manual cam chain tensioner. So that was very quickly what we found to be the issue, but I was very happy to have a couple of older, more experienced friends to help me. On with video. So I've got the engine out, I've got a friend here helping me take it apart. Valves have hit piston, but piston's not dead. I discovered, with the help of two far more competent older friends, one of whom has built rally engines for a living, the other is just the most talented mechanic. They both came over, we had tea and coffee and donuts and a chat, and they compared injuries and how much metalwork is in their body. But once we got to the bottom of that, they helped me understand what had gone wrong. I can show you just now. So why did the valves bend? The valves, the stems of which live in here. So you've got exhaust side, two valves, and you've got inlet side, two valves. So underneath you'd see the heads of the valves, and they'd be coming up towards us and then closing back down. You can actually see light through there where they were so bent. So they've hit the piston, and then the force of the piston coming up and the force of the valves being shoved down by the cams has bent them. You can see here, totally unrelated to me, and of course it is a used engine, and much like a pre-loved partner, they come with damage and stuff. I don't know what's happened there, but clearly something's been in the combustion chamber before, not on my watch luckily, but there's a bit of damage. So where are we? We've got the piston here. You can see the valves have touched it, but it's not cracked it, it's not bent the conrod. The cam chain is fine. Why did a bad thing happen? Basically, the cam chain tensioner failed. I've already thrown it in the bin, but it's basically a sprung roddy sort of thing that pokes through here on a spring, and it presses against a metal piece that puts tension onto the cam chain, which keeps the timing of the engine nice so that the valves open whilst the piston is close but not touching, and obviously if you lose timing then they smack together. So I'm going to turn the camera back round now and I'm going to talk to you about the solution and how much it costs. In looking up problems with the DRZ400 Suzuki engine, I found out the cam chain tensioners can fail. Mine failed. It manifested itself as much louder engine noise, total loss of power, and then like grinding to a halt. So tried to restart it, push, clatter, 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 like metal on metal noise. Tried to bump start it, so I probably exaggerated any damage there was, but it's damaged. And that's okay. Old stuff is allowed to break and you're allowed to learn to fix it. That's part of the fun. It would be a totally different story if this was my only vehicle and it was like critical for me to get to a job or see a loved one or whatever, but luckily it's not. How much is it going to cost? I need 4 valves, 2 inlet, 2 exhaust because all 4 are bent. I need valve stem oil seals, I need a gasket set, I need a cam chain tensioner, I need a bit of Loctite gasket sealant, all in using eBay, which is Wiseco, which are a reputable brand, Wiseco valves, a reputable gasket kit, but none of it's genuine Suzuki, £150. And I'm lucky in that I've got friends to help me put it all back together, but I'll sort of talk you through it. And there are much more skilled, better videos than this one. Please don't use this as a guide. Real mechanics put stuff on the internet. I'm just a rank amateur learning for the first time, but you can maybe learn something from my experience. There's a place called Fowler's in Bristol. They're a Suzuki dealer. They're a lots of things dealer, and they've got a huge parts department. If I wanted all the right parts from Fowler's for this engine, up to 14 days waiting, and it would cost £800 just for a top end rebuild, which I think is foul. It is pointless even trying. So it's going to be non-genuine but reputable parts, £150, and we'll be putting it back together. How is it going to go back together? I can sort of explain while the bits aren't here, so I'll try that now. So in here is everything you need to basically reseat or put a fresh valve into an engine. So you've got these 2 little guys down here which are called collets, and they're tapered, and they grab the top of the valve there where you can see that groove. You basically press this spring down into the head. I'll turn it over in a second and show you. The collets go either side, so they're like 180 degrees each. The spring is pushed out of the way with a valve spring compressor, which my mate Pete has left me very kindly. So you squash the spring down with this guy, thus, and then you slip the collets either side of the valve stem, and then you let the spring tension back up, and that grabs the valve. Pete said be careful that the collets are properly sat in there and one's not slightly sort of pushed up above the top of the valve, because it will let go and then the valve can drop into the engine, combustion chamber, and blah blah blah. So you slide the valve up into there. It comes through here and the stem comes out of here. You slide first of all a valve stem oil seal down that thing and sort of click it on, and they're rubber with sort of metal spring tension bands around them so that they grip on tight, and that stops oil seeping down into the combustion chamber and burning and sooting things up and you losing oil. So then you've got your valve stem oil seal on there. You put your, let's find it. So the valve is coming up through this hole here. You get your fat spring and your thin spring. So you go thin and fat spring, slide it down over the valve. Then you compress all of that, whoopsie, with your valve spring compressor, clues in the name. And put one collet this side, one collet this side. They clamp onto the valve, they grab it tight, and then lifting the spring back up, putting tension on it, grabs that valve so it can't ever fall down into the combustion chamber. Then it's simply a case of getting the cams back in, so your inlet this side, exhaust this side, inlet, exhaust. You put these guys on, I don't know what you call them, clamps or somethings, and then you slot this over the top. The cam chain comes up through here. You put a bolt through there to stop the cam chain dropping down into the bottom of the engine. Even if you do, you just pull it out with a magnet on a stick. And then the timing is important. So you've got numbers on your exhaust cam. So number 1 aligns with the mating face of the head. Number 2 is straight up. And then you basically do exhaust cam first, get the chain sat on that, count 15 links across, get the 15th roller pin to line up with number 2, and then you tension it up and you're there. But I'll explain all that properly when it comes to it. It is a relatively serious job because the engine is buggered as it stands. It needs new valves. However, both Pete and Jerry said that as engine breakages go, that one's about as kind as it could have been. Valves are much cheaper than cranks and conrods and bearings and pistons and all that sort of thing. So 4 broken valves is sort of okay. It's suboptimal. And the cam chain tensioner is a cheap part, and that failing is frustrating. I'll probably put a manual cam chain tensioner in, but it is salvageable, and the engine, the bike will roll again and live again. So just come along with me and I'll show you what it's like to sort of put it back together. As a layman, I won't necessarily be able to tell you all of the torque settings. I mean, I've got a manual with them in, but I don't want you to rely on me for all of that. I want you to look it up and learn as you go like I am. But I'm just, I think, assuring you that it's not as frightening as a job as it needs to be, doubly so if you can find someone that will give you a bit of guidance. And if you can't, there are videos on how to do this nicely. I'm just letting you know that even as a layman who's never done it before, you can do it. Jobs to do before the parts turn up are to, and this is for you to do, I've already done them. You want to clean up any surfaces that are going to be squashed back together. So you clean that off, you clean the carbony bits out of the exhaust valves, ports. Just clean up all those surfaces and then clean up the mating face there, and then you just wait for the gaskets to turn up, valves to turn up. Also Pete, my mate Pete, left me some valve grinding paste. Find this end, of course this end, so it's a double-ended tin, and sucky sticks. So you suck the valve onto the stick and then you sit twiddling it so that the valve makes perfectly sealed friends with the head, and the junction at which they meet is called the seat. So we're on the intake side of the engine. I want you to imagine that you're some air going in. There's obviously been a thing in some of the air that's gone in here before, and I mean the regularity of that pattern suggests screw thread to me, but if it had eaten a whole bolt, surely the whole engine would be mince. So we've got this here, intake side, remember that. And then obviously exhaust comes out this way to the front of the engine, front of the bike. It has been eating something one day, but it definitely wasn't what killed it this time, because there was nothing in the cylinder, and the marks only showed up when I cleaned the piston and I cleaned the head off. They were full of carbon and dust and build-up and whatever else. So I don't really know what that was. And because it's, I suppose, of interest, Pete and Jerry both said if they're going to break, they'll break here, 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 and there, and then they might snap around the plug hole, but there's no cracks that I can see. But I reckon it ate a bolt or something, or don't know. It's as clean as a whistle, really, which is good. And just a quick wire brush around there on a drill got most of the carbon out. So we're just waiting on parts now. Windedly, and welcome back to another day in my garage. My name's Fred Hope, and I'm lapping valves into the head today. I've already done one, and I've used Engineer's Blue or Prussian Blue to make sure that the seal is uniform and big enough. Just a very, very, very thin layer of Prussian Blue on the underside of the valve. Focus. Focus. There we are. And then that should correspond to a uniform line of blue, just when you tap and rub slightly with your stick and valve onto the head. You can see there's a bit of residual oil down there because you oil the valve stem so that it slides nice and easily, doesn't cause any undue wear. So that, with its blue line matching that blue line, is a good result. 3 more to go. Okay, the mating surface, I wish I had something to point with, here we go. The mating surface is this one here, like the uniform band that the oil is just above and is now drizzling onto. And on the exhaust valves, I think probably because carbon falls down from the head into the combustion chamber and then gets cramped, there are a couple of pits in this, and you can see there's still one tiny little one just there. I've now covered that in oil so you won't be able to see it, but trust me, it's there. So what I'm going to do is course one more time, and it's not like you're using a flipping pestle and mortar and really ranting the snot out of it. You just put the course on, twizzle this way, twizzle that way, lift up, twizzle this way, twizzle that way, lift up, turn around, like twizzle, lift, twizzle, lift. And it's only like a delicate seal anyway between the stick and the valve, so you can't like mince it, but I'm just going to put a bit more course on and then I'll be onto fine and finished. Okay, so the little pit is just there. You see it? Just there. And you might be thinking, well, if the valve seats were in much worse condition than this when the engine was running, what the hell are you worried about? And I might be worrying unduly about nothing, but I'd feel an utter fool if I didn't do things completely right, or I had the thing apart, put it back together and it was crap, and then had to pull it all apart again just because I was impatient or glib about my valve lapping. So I'm going to do a tiny bit more course just to get that last tiny pit out, and then it will be fine on the exhaust valves and we'll be there. Just sitting in the kitchen, and before I go and put the engine back together, I'm going to use this Clymer, someone was struggling with their spelling, but never mind, manual to learn properly, oh, that's a good shot, how to put the old engine back together. Okay, all the valves are back in, and the little, I don't know whether you call them keepers or collets, but there's two, they're semicircular, you can just see them down there, C-shaped things, and they grab into the top of the valve. They grab into, here's an old broken one, that machined part there, that sort of shoulder. And it was quite difficult the first time I tried it until I used a tiny bit of grease. You stick the collet to the valve, kind of where it lives, with the valve spring compressed, with this guy. So this end is on the springy bit, that end is on the valve. You wind it tight, not so tight you break it. That gives you enough stalk or stem of the valve to stick those little collets to, and then you wind the pressure off and it kind of clamps it on because they're cone shaped, so it clamps it on, and that means the cap can't fly off and the valves are nicely sprung. Now I'm going to put the cams in. So the wheel goes in the hole. I'm going to oil everything up. I've got a syringe, I've got some fresh oil, so I'm just going to oil everything up like mad, put it all together and then check the clearances. Just before you put your buckets back in with the shims, which is what looks like a little watch battery there, measure each one so that if your tolerances are out, your valve clearances are out, you know what your starting point is and you know whether you need to get a bigger shim or a smaller shim. So this one is 2.8, 2.81 mil, 2.8 by 9.48 mil diameter. Okay, so I'm going to measure each one and record it, and that way I know whether I need to go up in size or down in size once I've checked the clearances. Okay, we're now at a stage where we start timing the head up. So this side you've got 3 pointing up, 2 pointing across, and this side you've got 2 pointing up and 1 pointing across that way. So you've got intake is 3 up, 2 inwards, and then you've got exhaust 2 up, 1 outwards. Now if you look in there, you've got 3 pointing inwards as well. Okay. Another way of getting this broadly correct is if the cam lobes are pointing at 10 and 2, you're broadly there. So I'm going to put it all back on and check my clearances now. When you're installing your cam cap bolts, they're of different lengths, and if you're about to panic and think, ooh, which ones are the 2 long ones? 2 of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2 of 8. So the long ones, the 2 long bolts must be installed at the right end of the exhaust camshaft cap. See figure 21. Figure 21 tells us that the cam chain end, which is this end, so let's turn it round so it's making sense. It's going to be that one there and that one there. So it's going to be this one here and this one here. The exhaust cam cap bolts closest to the cog. Okay. Good old Clymer manual to the rescue again. How tight do you have to do the camshaft cap bolts? The answer is 10 Newton meters or 7 foot-pounds. Doing it in a crossing pattern in several passes. So if you do that one, then 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 you get the idea. And then just like that, it was fixed. Except it wasn't. The little watch battery shims that I needed, I couldn't really find in many places. So I asked loads of people, and 2 were possibly coming up with the winning result. One was JHS Racing, which is between Bath and Bristol in Keynsham. 44 Teeth, do a lot of stuff with them. And the other was Steve Marsh, who you can see drinking in the British Lion sometimes. Both of them managed to find the shims. JHS found them sooner, so I paid them £13 worth of biscuits and got 4 little watch battery shims. Knocked it all together. Did the trick where you slide the feeler gauges underneath the cam lobe to check the clearances. The clearances were perfect. I've recorded them all so I can check whether they're growing as the engine wears in. And then it was just putting it back together. Best tricks I've got for putting it back together are that each of the electrical connectors are a different shape, so you can't stuff that up. And also get a hot air gun on the unless you live in a hot country, get a hot air gun and heat up the plastic thing that the carb slots onto. You'll save yourself hours of wrestling with cold hard plastic. And then you simply put it back together. You go to Jerry's house to say thank you, and he's got a stethoscope with a stick on the end that you can listen to, and we listened to the cam chain and then tightened it until it stopped rattling at about 2000 RPM, gave it a quarter turn more, locked it off, perfect, and I just went out ripping. A gentle braking is not what I gave the bike, but it did seem to enjoy it, and so did I, because that's all I bought the bike for, was for fun. No one needs a DRZ, and it's back working and being fun. Diddly, and welcome along to Wiltshire, where we're not very far from the place that this sweet motorcycle died. I was holding constant throttle and it jumped timing. I've since fixed it, and I'm really pleased to say that it is fixed. I can hold it at constant throttle, no cam chain noise. I can pin the bastard wide open and it seems to love it. And even though there's a sort of slaty blue hue to a lot of the sky today, It's been wetter than a freshly divorced 50-something at a Magic Mike dance-off or whatever it's called, so we're pretty pleased with the result of the weather today. Better than just fixing the bike, I've learned stuff. I've learned how to fix it, I've learned how to not be afraid of like half a degree out on timing, I've learned masses about taking this thing apart and putting it back together, and I've learned not to be afraid of fixing my own bike, which is fantastic. So I'll get you some more shots of just going around and hitting puddles and whatnot. But the bike is fixed, and even though it's not indestructible, technically not Fred proof, it's pretty close, and it was certainly worth breaking it to learn how to fix it, to bond with a couple of mates more who are far more knowledgeable and older than me, so pick up some of their skills before they're not around to pass them on. It lives to ride another day. Calais, Calais. So thank you for watching. Is the DRZ400 Fred proof? No. Is anything? Barely. But is it fixable and a good learning experience to break and fix one? Yes. Tell me what you'd like to see me doing. I'll get back to biscuit reviews and things now that the weather's not quite so foul. And thank you for watching. P.S. I'm over 2,000 miles on the cub now. Worth. Repellado, ay mamá, repellado.